We all know that there are some things the elite don't want us to know about, but today we are learning just that. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we're counting down our list of the vintage photos the rich and powerful don't want you to see. Coming in at number 10 is North Korea camp. North Korean prison camps are a place of horror. Now this photo was taken at one of their camps called Chonggori Camp. The main purpose of Chonggori Camp is to punish people for usual crimes or political crimes such as illegal border crossings. Now the prisoners here are also used as slave laborers, and as a result they are forced to do hard and dangerous work for 14 hours a day. The prisoners live in crowded, dirty, insect-infested rooms without heating, while there is just one washing room for 1,000 prisoners. Now because of these bad hygienic conditions, in the summer of 2003, about 190 prisoners died of an infectious disease. Now 70 prisoners sleep in a room which is only designed to hold 20 people, lying on the floor without pillows or blankets. Not to mention, prisoners only get 140 grams of rice 3 times a day, while they're being forced to do hard labor such as logging with iron chains. Now often prisoners have their lives ended or they are crippled in work accidents. Prisoners are regularly subjected to beatings and inhumane treatment, all of which are administered by the guard's discretion. When a prisoner breaks a rule, he is tormented and confined in a solitary cell so small where he cannot stretch his legs for many days or weeks. Now many people say these camps have human rights violations, and with everything we do know, I can't imagine all the other horrors of the other camps. Number 9. Dorothy Counts. Dorothy Counts is an American civil rights pioneer and one of the first black students admitted to the Harry Harding High School. In 1956, 40 black students from North Carolina applied to transfer to a white school after the passing of the Purcell Plan. Dorothy's family applied her and her 2 brothers to enroll in an all-white school after her father was approached by Kelly Alexander Sr. Now of her family, only Dorothy was accepted, and Dorothy was dropped off on her first day of school by her father, along with their family friend, Edwin Tompkins. As their car was blocked from going closer to the entrance, Edwin offered to escort Dorothy to the front of the school while her father parked the car. As she got out of the car to head down the hill, her father told her, "Hold your head high, you are inferior to no one." Now in this photo, you can see her being harassed by her classmates. After just 4 days of harassment that threatened her safety, her parents withdrew her from the school, but the images of Dorothy being verbally assaulted by her white classmates were seen around the world. Number 8. First woman in the Boston Marathon. Kathrine Switzer was 20 years old when she decided to run the Boston Marathon in 1967. Now at the time it was an all-male race. Women were not allowed to run, and organizers always ridiculed them. Now no one believed a woman could run it, so when Kathrine signed up, she signed the necessary paperwork with her initials. When the race started, she set off alongside her boyfriend Tom Miller, and while running, camera crews and photographers from a press bus spotted her and photographed her a lot. Now as this was happening, an official spotted her running. Jock Semple, the race manager, ran after her in leather shoes and tried to rip off her number. "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers," he yelled. Now before he could pull her out of the race, Tom blocked him. The idea of women running in the marathon was highly controversial. Now Kathrine finished the race, knowing it would look like a publicity stunt if she stopped, and thankfully 5 years later, women were given the right to run in the marathon. Number 7. Last public execution. Eugen Weidmann was a German criminal and serial slayer who was executed by guillotine in France in June 1939, which was the last public execution in France. After a failed first attempt, Eugen and his accomplices managed to successfully kidnap an American woman named Jean de Koven, and Jean was lured to the house the trio rented, and she was strangled to death by Eugen and buried in the backyard. A couple months later, Eugen shot a chauffeur named Joseph Chofi to death and stole his money. Just 2 days later, Eugen ended the life of a woman named Janine Keller. Janine was also shot and robbed. 3 other people had their lives ended by Eugen and his accomplices, all of them being shot to death and then robbed. Eugen's last victim had a business card from Eugen in his house, which resulted in the police tracking down Eugen, since it seemed that he was one of the last people who had seen the victim alive. When confronted, Eugen tried to shoot the 2 policemen who had come to arrest him. him. However, Eugen was knocked unconscious with a hammer by one of the policemen and promptly taken into custody. He was found guilty of homicide and was sentenced to death. On June 17, 1939, Eugen was beheaded outside the prison in Saint Pierre and Versailles. The historical behavior by spectators was so scandalous that French President Albert Lebrun immediately banned all future public executions. Number 6. Erase Nikolai Yezhov. Nikolai Yezhov was a Soviet secret police officer under Joseph Stalin who was the head of the NKVD from 1936 to 1938 during the height of the Great Purge. He organized mass arrests, torment, and executions, but then he fell from Stalin's good graces. He was arrested and subsequently admitted in a confession to a range of anti-Soviet activity, including unfound arrests during the Purge. He was executed in 1940 along with others who were blamed for the Purge, and Nikolai was not only ousted, executed, and disgraced along with his family, he was then methodically erased from photographs where he had previously appeared with his commander. Overnight, Nikolai went from one of the highest officers in a powerful New World Order to a shadow in a poorly lit photo and a name no one dared to utter. Now, Nikolai wasn't the only person to receive this Photoshop treatment, as it was common in the communist government to deny failures and make inconvenient truths, even people, disappear. Now, this practice has continued in current communist-led governments where rebellious leaders are removed by force and deleted from official documents. Number 5. Criminals in a Box. This disturbing photo was taken in July 1913 by French photographer Albert Kahn. He often took trips through exotic countries, and it was during a visit in Mongolia that he happened to stumble upon this woman who had been condemned to a slow and painful starvation. She was boxed up in what would become her tomb and deposited in a remote desert. There were bowls of water on the ground, and the prisoner is allowed to beg passerbys for food, though not much is given. Now, the photographer was forced to leave her there, as it would be against prime directive of anthropologists to intervene in a culture's law or order system. Anthropologists are only able to observe, they cannot push their own beliefs or interfere in any way. Now, it's just incredibly disturbing though, and I can't imagine what was going through Albert's mind when he found her. Number 4. The Exorcism of Annelise Michel. Annelise Michel was a German woman who underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites during the year before her death. When she was younger, she experienced a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with depression and was treated by a psychiatric hospital. By the time she was 20, she had become intolerant of various religious objects and began to hear voices. After the taking of psychiatric medications for over 5 years failed to improve her symptoms, Annelise and her family became convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism, and while rejected at first, 2 priests got permission from the local bishop in 1975. The priests began conducting exorcism sessions, and the parents stopped consulting doctors. She began increasingly speaking about dying to atone of the wayward youth of the day and the apostate priests of the modern church. Now, a total of 67 exorcism sessions, 1 or 2 each week, lasting up to hours each, were performed for approximately 10 months in 1975 and 1976. Number 3. Radium Girls. The Radium Girls were female factory workers who contracted radiation poisoning from painting radium dials, watch dials, and hands with self-luminous paint. The incidents occurred at 3 factories in the United States, one in Orange, New Jersey beginning around 1917, one in Ottawa, Illinois beginning in the early 1920s, and one in Waterbury, Connecticut also in the 1920s. Now, after being told that the paint was harmless, the women in each facility ingested deadly amounts of radium after being instructed to point their brushes on their lips in order to give them a fine tip, and some also painted their fingernails, faces, and teeth with the glowing substance. Now, the prolonged exposure to radium caused dental pain, loose teeth, lesions, and ulcers, and the failure of tooth extractions to heal were some of these conditions. Now, many of the women later began to develop anemia, bone fractures, and caused their vertebrae to collapse, their jaws to swell up and fall off, and their lives to slowly end in agony while battling cancer. Now, the photo here shows one of the victims, and it's truly heartbreaking. Number 2. Unit 731. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that engaged in lethal human experimentation and biological weapons manufacturing during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. Now, this photo shows them experimenting on prisoners. It's estimated that this place ended the lives of 200,000 to 300,000 people. Unit 731 was responsible for some of the most notorious war crimes committed by the Japanese armed forces. It routinely conducted tests on people who were dehumanized and internally referred to as logs. Experiments included disease injections, controlled dehydration, biological weapons testing, vivisection, organ harvesting, amputation, and standard weapons testing. In other tests, subjects were deprived of food and water to determine the amount of time until death. They were also placed into low-pressure chambers until their eyes popped from their sockets, experimented upon to determine the relationship between temperatures, burns. They were hung upside down until death, crushed with heavy objects, electrocuted, dehydrated with hot fans, injected with animal blood, exposed to lethal doses of X-rays, subjected to various chemical weapons inside gas chambers, injected with seawater, and burned or buried alive. Now, this place was truly horrific, and so many people suffered. And coming in at number 1 is Blanche Monnier. When French authorities received an anonymous tip in 1901 that a woman was being held prisoner at an aristocrat's house in the city of Poitiers, they sent out officers to search the home. Behind the locked door of the pitch-black attic, they found a skeletal middle-aged woman laying on a straw mattress covered with her own excrement, while insects and rotting food littered the floor. Now, the room's odor was so disgusting that officers couldn't even continue their investigation, but they were able to learn that the 55-pound woman, still clinging to life after 25 years trapped in that same room, was named Blanche Monnier, and that her captor was her own mother. Now, this photo of her was taken shortly after she was rescued. Well, that's all for our list of vintage photos the rich and powerful don't want you to see. Which photo shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.